Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts, ideas and stories from some incredible guests to hopefully inspire you to live more adventurously in your everyday lives. So before I begin this week and introduce this week's guest, I just wanted to touch base with you on a couple of things. The first is to say that if you are thinking of potentially joining our winter adventure to Scandinavia in March of next year, please do reach out and get in touch. There are a few spaces left and I would love to fill them. And even more amazing, if I was to take some of the friends of this podcast along too, it'd be wonderful to have you. So please do reach out. The details are on my website, resiliencework.co.uk, or feel free to drop me a message and get in touch. And all of the ways in which you can get in touch with me, I will put in the summary at the end of this podcast. And the other thing is just to say really that this week, falling it as it does on the 11th of November, is specifically dedicated to Remembrance. It's a time of year when I think for many of us, we stop to pause and to reflect, whether it's due to having relatives who served in the armed forces or our own experiences of conflict. It's always a reflective time of year. And I think for many can trigger quite a lot of difficult memories and experiences as well. So with that in mind, this week's podcast has a remembrance theme to it. And so I'm really delighted to welcome Gina Allsop to the show. Gina is a military veteran. She served in the Royal Signals, and following a series of pretty traumatic events in her life, which I know she'll go on to detail herself, she was connected with SSAFA. For those of you who don't know, SSAFA is a charity that supports former members of the armed forces and their families. And as a result of the support she received from SSAFA, she wanted to give something back and to raise money and funds for them. And she did that last year with a huge physical challenge that she took on. And this year, she decided to take on a slightly different challenge recently and has taken on the rather incredible job of curating a book of military poems called Military Memories. And this is a collection of poetry by veterans, serving personnel and their families, and is a way of telling their story and their life in and around the services, but also to raise money for SSAFA and Sporting Force, which are the two charities that she selected to donate the proceeds to. And the book is not yet out in publication, although I believe it will be very soon. And I'll put all the links and everything in the show notes to go and find it. But it's a real pleasure to welcome Gina here today. Thank you so much for joining me. I was just wondering if you could start off with just talking a bit more about Military Memories, about the poetry book that you're editing and that I know you've contributed to as well. And just, what inspired you to take on this project? So I can imagine probably quite a large project. And where did that idea come from?
Yeah, so it's a bit of an interwoven story of how I got to writing Military Memories. So it started with tragedy in my own life, with my brother's death in mid-2020. So he had a short battle with cancer and unfortunately lost it. So in that time, you are grief-stricken. So how I've always coped with stresses, I think, is I've always gone and done crazy challenges, like cycling across Death Valley and, from one end of Scotland to the other and that type of style of adventure. So I wanted to turn it into something positive. So I decided that I was going to do 100 miles a week running to start with, which soon changed to introducing some cycling, because it was quite hard to do 100 miles a week on that. So I added cycling and I did 100 miles a week for the year. And it took me on amazing journeys because we went, I just didn't stay local. I went and did some crazy stuff and in Snowdon and, well, not crazy, just, getting out on the trails when we were allowed after COVID. So also during that time, I was getting helped by some military charities. Help for Heroes was one of them. because just the day before my brother died, I got knocked off my bike as well, so my bike was crushed. So I was a bit of a unlucky time then. And so that's where I got involved with Help for Heroes and SSAFA and stuff, because basically I mentioned to a caseworker that they were, I'd broken my bike, and they sort of said, oh, well, we'll see if we can get you, a few pounds for it, to try and buy a new one, which I never thought would transpire. And in the end, I got put in contact with SSAFA, and they really helped me and ended up helping funding to get a bike, which in turn then helped me raise the money for my brother's cancer charity, which had helped him, which was brilliant. And we ended up raising £10,000 for that charity, which was it was phenomenal. I thought, I'll raise maybe a couple of thousand for it. And then we've actually started with that money an art foundation in his name for cancer sufferers. And the reason for that was when my brother was going through his treatments, he looked for an art class for that reason, but the funding had been cut in his area. So from there as well, at the same sort of time, I'd started writing a few poems. So I'd written a poem for my brother's funeral, which was actually read out at his funeral, because we were in the time of COVID still, so we could only have 6 people at the funeral. So a lot of it was weirdly went over the internet for people, friends and families to watch. And it was watched by someone who worked for a cancer charity called Wirral Hospice. And they then asked me to read out my poems in uniform for veterans that had just passed away for their virtual funerals. So that's sort of where the poetry link started, because I thought, so maybe my poems are quite good and other people want to listen to them. I then discovered some diaries, and they had like poems in from when I was in operations. So I've obviously been doing it for quite a while. That got me thinking, why don't we put a book together of poetry from the whole of the Forces family, RAF, Navy, volunteers from like Help for Heroes and SSAFA, so that people can see the journey that the military take from joining all the way to leaving and getting out the army and starting a new life. So because it was poetry, it's kind of, what are people going to think? Because I'm supposed to be a rough tufty soldier and that sort of, I do all these crazy, races, and I'm into my fitness. So I did actually put it up on Facebook, and the feedback I got from friends and family was like, this is an amazing idea, which was surprised me, to be honest. And I asked in a few groups if people could write stuff, and I started to get poems from veterans and serving personnel. I then approached SSAFA and asked them whether they would be happy for me to write a book, and they were really supportive about it because they thought it was a brilliant idea. And that's where it all kind of started from. So it's quite a long story, but you can see how it gets to it. And from that, I've also discovered, the mental health side of it as well, and how poems inspire and they help, people get their emotions down, which is how I started, if you like, writing poetry. Because I think one of my first poems that I can remember writing was for my father's funeral when I just joined the army. I've lost that now, but it's kind of from great emotion comes sort of poems, I think, and to get memories and words out like maybe you couldn't say to a person. So yeah, so it's a long story, but
no, and I think, I mean, I don't want to use the word wonderful because it's obviously born out of such tragedy and you've been through so much with that, but also just this, like you said, those interconnections, that sort of almost coming full circle back to that place where you wrote in these diaries, you had those poems there, and that sort of thread, I guess, that has woven through your life and sort of reconnects you with those different bits of yourself and others as well. And I think there is something so powerful. I know from, people I've spoken to who write poetry, and certainly, even those like myself, you just read it and just, it takes you to a different place, I think, than reading something in a more structured sort of written way. that can be really powerful, like you say, when people find it hard to communicate in other forms. So I can imagine, I mean, I was just thinking, often what happens is, you have a wonderful idea and you think this is amazing, you put it out there, and then it gathers pace and momentum and you start going, oh my gosh, what have I bitten off here? This is quite big, and probably more than I imagined. And I was just wondering, what have been some of the challenges that you faced in pulling this together? And I guess particularly, what have you been proud to sort of find a way around or overcome or navigate?
Yeah, so who would have thought that, putting a poetry book together would be such a challenge? I mean, I came on it and thought, it'll be easy. I'll get some poems, stick them in a book, print it, and that'll be it. But
simple, yeah.
far more than that. It's like running a mini business. It consumes a lot of my day. Just, if it's just interacting with the poets and checking that they're okay, giving them updates so they know where we are with the project, and it's kind of putting it all together, which is a total like alien task for me, really, and the emotional side as well, when somebody sends you their poems, and some of them, they're all great, good, but some of them have you laughing, some of them have you in tears, and it's a real roller coaster. And I keep having to edit the book or going through it, and I'm like, I can't read that again because it stirs up so much emotion. So yeah, and it's just been really inspiring, meeting new people as well, and making those connections with people, and the help that I've received. But seeing the near finished article, when I you have a vision of what you think it's going to look like, and then when it comes together, because I've got an amazing artist on board, which again has all fell in my lap, so it's been amazing, and seeing the pages, it's just something that I'm hoping people will find as, a beautiful thing that maybe they'll keep. I have some books that you cherish and some books that you read and, for holiday, and then you pass on to your friends or give to a charity shop. I'm hoping it's going to be the one that people keep and they refer back to. Yeah, so it has been a big challenge, just coordinating everything really, and trying to get people to work together. And then I think my biggest obstacle now is probably marketing and social media. I've never been on Twitter before. I've joined as Twitter as Military Memories, so that was a learning curve as well. I quite like it now, but it's certainly a different platform to Facebook and Instagram, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. I think that social media baptism is when you've not been used to operating particularly, or like you say, you use it for sort of mainly connecting with friends and family, and you start using it in a business sense. It's a very different beast. Well, as you were talking, I was just thinking about, that process of people sending you in their poems and they're sharing that sort of quite vulnerable bit of themselves with you, and how that must feel like quite a responsibility in some ways. To not only are you creating, trying to do the practical stuff of turning it into a book, but also, like you said, that sort of emotional and carrying something for people as well, in terms of them putting it out there. I mean, how have you experienced that?
It's been really unexpected, making those connections with people who you would never have met ever, and then they are sending you poems like about PTSD, which are particularly the hard-hitting ones, as you can imagine. And one of the most awkward or horrible things about it is if somebody sent you a poem in and you're not going to use it on this occasion, and you have to sort of tell them. And it's not generally because the poem's bad. It might be because I maybe got one that fits better in the book. And I didn't want to make it all about doom and gloom. So we did want, because joining the military, it isn't all, we have some amazing laughs and times. So it's not all about the doom and gloom, although that is part of the job. It was about showing different sides to it and about showing the journey as well. But yeah, so I feel like I know all the poets now. So, when I'm going through the edit and notice that something's been, I can notice that something's been changed, or, well, that's not the right person for that poem. So just by their poems, I feel I know them, and then by my connections, just via emails or calls. It's been quite an experience, really. The people it's brought into my life, and not just the poets, neither. You know, we've got we've got an artist who connected with me and said, "Have you got an artist?" And I haven't got round to thinking about that. And he's been amazing. He's literally, I've asked for photographs from all the poets, and they've sent me photographs, and he's illustrated them in an amazing sort of sketchbook way. And the work he's put in has been fabulous, really. And then I've also got a lady as well who's a university lecturer in poetry, which has come from a connection which is, you know, really random, from a sporting event I did. And she's been brilliant for giving me tips on that side of things, which I'm not educated to a university level in poetry by no means. I think probably GCSE if I'm lucky. So she's been fabulous at, you know, just putting commas and weird little symbols in the right place and pauses. So she's really helped develop the poet's poetry to make it read better and flow more. Not that a lot of it needed adjusting, but, you know, you've got an expert eye there, so it's been fabulous. And then got the people in the charities that I've met, and even to, you know, BFBS, a connection there. That's then got a little mini series on, which is highlighted not just the creative writing, but creative writing to help mental health within the armed forces and the, you know, the wider population. So that's been a real key link with the mental health side of it, which is really apparent. And I think it's a different form of therapy, isn't it, where people can use, instead of which my therapy is. Well, I thought it was just running and cycling, but clearly I've been doing a bit of poetry along the way.
Oh my gosh, there are so many threads I could pick up on what you said. It's so wonderful. I was just thinking about that thing, like you said, of getting to know the voices of the poets, of the different people, that through that poetry you also form connection. And one of the things that I often talk about around resilience is, you know, we tend to see it as a very sort of individualistic thing in modern society, that you're either resilient or you're not, or it's all sort of down to you whether you cope or you thrive and all the rest of it. And I think one of the amazing things about resilience is that actually fundamentally it's about connection and relationships, because we are tribal group animals at the end of the day, that's what gives us our strength and being able to turn to people. And I was just thinking as you were speaking that wonderful sense of connection, and also for people to feel seen and understood, that point about recognizing their voice, knowing when it was something's not quite right because it doesn't sound like them. And I think that must be, as well as the process of writing the poem, so incredibly valuable for those people that you're sort of supporting or bringing along on this journey with you. I was just wondering what, you know, and I don't really want to ask this question because I know you're just in the process of trying to get this book out and publish it. And at the point at which this goes live, hopefully it's going to be out there in the public domain, if not very shortly. But as a result of this journey you've been on with putting together this collection, I mean, is there somewhere further that you'd like to take it, or another, you know, adventure, whether that's a psychological or physical one, that you think actually that's where I want to go? Or basically, do you want to lie on the sofa and stare at the ceiling for a few months and go, I'm done now?
It's amazing how the creation of this book and when it is published, you know, hopefully it'll inspire more people to look at things in a different way, or maybe, you know, just by reading it help people. But the opportunities that have started to come in from just writing this simple poetry book to make some money for a charity, you know, which couldn't be easier, really, could it? I think I'd rather run up a mountain someday. But yeah, so from some of the charities. So I've also we've got Sporting Force involved in it because Sporting Force are a smaller charity, so I've decided to split the money with both. And they've been, before they were going to be beneficiaries of it, they've been amazing supporters of me. And have put me in touch with people who've helped me along the way. And they're actually, one of the opportunities is they're trying to do a festival next year. Hopefully everything's open again, and they've said we'll do a poetry corner for you. So I'm like, oh wow, so it'll kind of, if you like, promote the book, promote health and well-being within, creative writing. So they're going to sort of do like a little poets corner, and we'd have some it's all really early stages, but somebody's been in contact with me. I forget the name of it. I think it's the Eyes of Innocence or something like that. It's a poetry foundation, and they want to get involved together. So I was thinking, well, they're the experts. I'll invite them along. So the connections have been amazing with the opportunities. I'm doing some speeches at a defence dinner to promote that side of things as well, with the health and well-being and mental side of poetry, and promoting the book. So I just, you just don't know where it's going to lead. If it's successful, and because I've got enough content still coming in, then I could potentially do a second book with a different aspect. If people find it and buy it, interesting. If not, then, just helping a few people, even if it's just, when we have the festival and we inspire some people to write their thoughts down, which then, to me, once I've written it down, it's on paper, and you can kind of get rid of that negativity if it's a negative poem, or if it's a positive poem, it'll make you feel happy. So so I just don't know where it's going to lead, because it's kind of growing legs daily, which is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So exciting. Yeah. Gosh. And it's that thing of, well, I'm not sure where this is going to go. And, it also makes me think of definitions we have around what success is, what the outcomes we're looking for out of us. And like you say, actually, what it does is inspire other people to find a way to express themselves and to use that creative process, to use poetry, whatever means it is, to have an outlet, then that's an incredible achievement in itself. So if somebody's listening to this, and they may be listening and thinking, I want to write some poetry, or I want to put together a poetry book, or it might be, actually, I've got this idea, this sort of nugget that's burning away at me, and I want to put it out there, but I'm a bit reticent to do so. I'm holding back. I mean, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
It's always scary when you've got, you're going to start a new challenge. And I think the main thing is to sort of take that step and just get a feeling, because I sat on the idea probably for a few months, to be fair, because I didn't know what people would think. And if you just put it out to friends and family, you'd like to think they were being honest, and they tell you that, well, that could work, or, and the when I put it out there, I was really surprised at the feedback I got. So if you've got something that you want to do, the main thing I'd probably say is speak to your friends and your family. I know your family will probably always say that's amazing. So maybe some of your friends that you can get an honest opinion from, but don't sit on it for too long, because then it'll just become, when you're older, I wish I did that, or I was going to do that, and it's kind of, I was gonna is that phrase that I don't ever want to have to use about something that I had a thought of. I want to try to do what my ideas are. If they don't work, then that's probably, the greatest sort of piece of learning that you can get. Trying to find the words for it. That's the best way to overcome it is you fail, and then you come up with a better plan. But a lot of the time you won't, if you put the groundwork in. But it's always good to get your thoughts out, isn't it? And see if it's going to work. Because if I'd never have took that step and put it on Facebook, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be getting all these opportunities, and potentially the book wouldn't be raising money for two very worthy charities, and that could the money, hopefully from there will change somebody's life, even if it's one veteran's life that it inspires, or changes, or they benefit from the money, then it's worth all the effort, isn't it?
No, absolutely. That's amazing. It's often that scary step of going, okay, I'm going to make this, it almost feels like it's making it real by sharing it. But as you say, that all that's committing you to is getting feedback on your idea and potentially making it even better or taking you down different paths. So that's wonderful. I mean, if people do have listened to this and they think, absolutely, I'd love to get hold of a copy of the book, or to find out more about you and your fundraising efforts, where can they go?
Yeah, so we've got a website set up. It's kind of in development, like everything, but you can get in contact with myself there. So it's military-memories.com. So we've got that, and we're on Twitter as @military memos, and I've also got a Facebook page somewhere. So which
cool. Well, I'll find it. Don't worry. We'll put all those links in the show notes as well, so people can follow them.
Yeah, or people can just email me, and that's just Gina at military-memories, military-memories.com. So I'm always happy to get someone to email me and try and help them and give them some advice if I can, or point them in the right direction.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gina. That's been absolutely amazing. I can't wait to read the book. It sounds incredible, and the work you're doing to support from a mental health, from a well-being perspective, I think is just amazing. So thank you so much. I wish you all the very best of luck with it. I can't wait to see where it goes. So a huge thank you to Gina for joining me on today's show. The latest update from Gina is they were hoping to release the book in time for Remembrance Sunday. There have been a few delays, so they're very much anticipating it will be out next week. So if you do want to either purchase the book or find out more about it, please do follow the Twitter account Military Memories, or visit the website, and all the links will be in the show notes for that too, as we previously discussed. And this week, I just wanted to pick up on the theme of comfort zones and what's the thing that challenges us? What's the thing that takes us? And I know we've discussed comfort zones loads on this show. In fact, it's the very premise for where the show comes from. But what I found really interesting in Gina's story is, she's pushed herself outside of her physical or comfort zone on numerous occasions and raised a lot of money for charity in the process, and also has found a physical exercise and challenges are a real way of helping herself and supporting her own mental health. But I find it really fascinating that actually sometimes it's not the physical challenges that's the thing that really tests us, or that leads us to a new place. And I think with the poetry compilation, especially if it's not something that you would normally take on, I thought it was really interesting to hear Gina talk about so many of the demons that we often face when we're taking on physical challenges, and that in this case for her it was that, that sense of this isn't my background, this isn't what I'm known from, but it's also something that I found hugely helpful to me, and that therefore it's worth exploring and pushing through, and how that's opened up a whole world, not just for her, but for the contributors to tell their own stories and to share their own work and provide a space where that felt comfortable. And I often think it's interesting how when we challenge our own comfort zones, not only do we inspire or encourage other people to do the same, but we also make it more possible by creating a sort of a wider safety net around that concept that, there is psychological safety when someone has stepped out of theirs and been prepared to be vulnerable and taken on something different, that we can sometimes decide to meet them in that place, and that makes it feel more possible for us too. And I love the link between, psychological courage, physical courage, and how potentially doing one thing in one space can lead us to do another thing in another space too. That, certainly in Gina's case, taking on all of those physical challenges, which did really push her and take her to her limits, opened up the possibility for taking on that psychological challenge that has then led her to do something completely different too. So I'd love to know what you think about that interconnection between our physical and our psychological selves, and how those comfort zones collide in a way. As always, please do reach out and get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. So you can find me on Instagram, Resilience at Work, or the Everyday Adventure Pod. You can find me on Facebook in the Everyday Adventure Club. You can contact me via my website, resiliencework.co.uk, or reach out to me on LinkedIn, Nikki Bass. Lots of different ways to get in touch. So as always, I'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, I really look forward to seeing you again next week. I can't believe we're moving forward in the series. We've only got a few episodes left, and that's the end of season 4. I don't quite understand how this has happened. But anyway, November is chugging along. And anyway, we will be back next week with another fantastic guest for you. So I really hope you'll join me then. Take care. Bye.